And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Sunday morning. Band of IFR here with moisture coming eastward across the Bering Sea. Marginal VFR into the western interior here, all the way up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and then off to the northeast, covering the central and eastern Arctic coast and north slope. And still marginal VFR in areas here of the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, down to about the Alaska Range. Good VFR, Kuskokwim Valley, eastward here across all of the southeast coast. And for tomorrow, no change. Still good VFR, or for the afternoon tomorrow, good VFR eastern half of the state, all the way up to the north slope in the Arctic coast, including Kodiak Island here, all the way over to the Panhandle across the Gulf. Big area of IFR here with that big storm and broad area southwest flow pushing moisture right into the western part of the state, all the way up to the Brooks Range there, with marginal VFR getting into the Bethel area, IFR getting into the Bethel area, marginal VFR trying to push into the Kuskokwim Valley, and from Unalaska Island westward to Amchitka, IFR. And then that continues to move northeast and east here, mostly sliding into the central interior and then on up to the Arctic coast, extending back to the southwest there toward the Pribilof Islands. And looks like VFR here for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. This all for Monday morning. On up into Cook Inlet here with definitely conditions deteriorating over the eastern part of the state, but improving back to the west here. St. Lawrence Island becoming VFR Monday morning, and also from about Atka Island westward, good VFR. Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin, on down across the Panhandle VFR. And then for Friday or Monday afternoon, we've got VFR here for the southeast coast, Yakutat again, and then marginal VFR showing up in Prince William Sound, and that area of IFR now shifting inland here, extending from northeast Bristol Bay right up across the Kuskokwim Valley into the central interior, then on up to the eastern Brooks Range. Improving to the west of that with some lingering marginal VFR here over the Chukchi Sea, St. Lawrence Island along the southwest coast of Nunivak Island, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, but good VFR covering much of the Bering Sea now and all of the Aleutians. So going on to the passes for the Brooks Range up there, Hanatuvik-Nadigan looking really good tomorrow, both VFR. And Lake Clark and Merrill, same forecast, VFR flying. In fact, for all of the Alaska Range, it'll be VFR tomorrow, rainy, windy, and Isabel. Down to Mentasta, same forecast, VFR. Portage and Tanita looking VFR as well. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Moving on to freezing levels at the surface here, just along the southwest coast, but up north toward the Bering Strait, and then just south of the North Gulf Coast, cutting in across the southern Panhandle, 2,000 feet there down toward Dixon Entrance. And then with southwest flow here, 12,000 feet coming up to the west central Aleutians, 2,000 feet all the way up into the northern Bering Sea, but still just to the west of St. Lawrence Island. Icing, again, along that frontal boundary here, will be an area of isolated moderate rime icing, St. Matthew Island trailing back into the western Aleutians, and considerable moderate icing here in the Chukchi Sea, pushing into the Seward Peninsula, across Norton Sound, down into the Yukon Delta. And from there, jet stream. Strong southwest flow here at 33,000 feet, up to 170 knots there out over the western Bering Sea, all the way up and then coming over the top of this ridge right through this area. Northerly winds tomorrow morning up to 125 knots right through the eastern interior now as everything's starting to shift eastward and drop off to the southeast, but still a pretty good northerly jet here coming down across the North Gulf Coast there. Light over the southeast coast, 9,000 feet here. Much lighter winds at this elevation here along the eastern interior with the stronger winds back out to the west. Southwest, anywhere from 80 to 95 knots here along and in advance of that frontal boundary there, with the main low staying back in the Russian Far East area. And that also at 3,000 feet, pretty strong winds here, quite an area of strong southwest winds at 3,000 feet, 65 knots, all the way up to the Bering Strait, 70 knots blowing across the Chukchi Sea. That whole wind max starting to shift eastward. Otherwise light over the eastern and central part of the state, Gulf of Alaska, and the Panhandle. So for turbulence, possibly severe, especially for small aircraft. Isolated severe here in the red shaded area from the Bering Strait up to about Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, maybe Point Ley there. Otherwise considerable moderate in a pretty large area there from the western Arctic coast down across the Yukon Delta, Nunivak Island, Permolofts, right on down into the central Aleutian areas, and then pick up in the westerlies there, bringing some moderate turbulence into the Shimian Attu area.